If you're applying for analytics jobs and not hearing anything back, or you're getting interviews but not able to convert them to actual offers, I can almost guarantee it's one of the things that I'll be speaking about in this video. And I'm not talking about the surface level stuff that you've probably already heard. I'm talking about the specific things that analytics hiring managers and technical interviewers actually care about. The things that separate the candidates that actually get offers and ones who silently get ghosted. I've seen this from both sides, and today I'm laying it all out. Let's get into it. So I have to give you some quick context before I go ahead and dive in. My name is Zazo. I've been in analytics for 4 years. At this point, I'm currently a senior data analyst. So I reviewed hundreds of resumes and done hundreds of mock interviews, as well as speaking to hiring managers in my own role and also other technical recruiters, specifically in the tech field. So I have plenty of experience when it comes to these sorts of things and what makes a good hireable analyst. And today I'm gonna split it in two parts. I'm gonna split it into the resume, or how you actually get the interview, and then the interview itself, also known as how you get the actual job offer. Stay through both because they're connected in ways most people don't realize. So the first thing we're gonna start with is the resume. And the first mistake that I see is most resumes that I reviewed strictly just list a bunch of tasks and don't really hit on the impact side of those projects or tasks that are being completed. A lot of these resumes look like somebody just copy and pasted the job description and just tweaked it a little so that it fits perfectly into their resume. What hiring managers are actually looking for are the following. They're looking for if you've moved any type of financial number, time, cost savings, revenue, profit, any of those things, if you actually solved a problem, and did your work even matter? So not something like built a dashboard using Tableau, but something like build a pipeline monitoring dashboard that reduced weekly reporting by 6 hours. So something like that clearly shows the business value and the time saved. Also, the costs that are saved. Those 6 hours could have been used or could have been spent by another associate doing that reporting, but instead automating it really shows the impact of what time was saved. So I reviewed plenty of these resumes that kind of look like this. And one of my clients, as soon as they changed the way that they framed their actual task or projects, they got multiple interviews and ultimately landed a job. All right, so now the next mistake is not tailoring your resume to the role. If you only have one resume, you are doing it all wrong. Analytics is not just one job, or a data analyst is not just one job. Being a business analyst at a small startup is way different than being a business analyst at a Fortune 500 company, as well as even the different domains and industries. You can be in healthcare, marketing, product, SaaS, all of these different types of things. So it becomes very easy to filter out individuals or candidates that don't have the specific requirements for the job in the hiring manager's eyes. So what I would do is read the job description like a study guide. So if they mention something about experimentation, things that you might want to include are A/B testing, experimentation, or other types of testing within your resume. You also want to pay attention, what types of tools do they list? Is it specifically a Tableau, Looker, or Power BI for data visualizations, Python, any of these other specific tools? You don't want to do something like just put EDA, exploratory data analysis per se. Also mention those specific tools in your resume. You also want to mention throughout your resume, what kind of data did you work with that matches theirs? So if it's healthcare or it's marketing, you can inject some of those different terms within your resume for that specific position. So things like customer acquisition costs, marketing channels, marketing funnels, brand awareness, those types of things specifically for marketing. Healthcare and product, exactly the same in that sense of using those terms that coincide with that specific industry or domain. You also want to pay attention to the seniority signal. So what is a seniority signal? Is this an entry-level role? Is this a more senior role? You want your resume to match that same signal. So if it's a senior role, you want to have a lot of things where you are positioning your resume in a way that signals that you've led or been a vital part in projects, not just doing, regular analysis, that you led something, you own something. All right, the skills section problem in the resume, and I see this all the time where everyone just stuffs as many data analytics terms as they can in one section. And here's another thing. If your skills section is right after your summary, move that all the way down below project and work experience. I see this all the time. So you always want to have your project or your work experience, if you have any, right after the summary. All of the other tools and technologies that you use can go below that, because almost everybody that's applying probably has the same, if not pretty close to the same tools that you have. And if you get past the ATS system and someone actually goes to look at your resume, they only take a couple seconds, and that's going to take away from all the stuff that they actually care about. So here's what works when listing out your skills or tools. You want a clean, organized skills section that is organized by category. So for example, if you have some languages that you'll put languages, Python, R, SQL, so on and so forth, BI and visualization tools, Power BI, such and such and such. You want it to be clean and organized. You don't want exploratory data analysis, SQL, Excel, Power BI, Python. You don't want it to look like that. All right, so that's on the resume side. Now let's talk about when the resume actually works and you get that interview, because this is where I see smart, qualified people completely blow the opportunity. And in a lot of ways, it's pretty avoidable. So the first part, or the first mistake I see, is a lot of candidates and people that I've worked with treat the interview as it is a test and not a conversation. So what they tend to do is they tend to just either type, just give the answer and let it fester in silence. And they don't explain their thinking at all, or kind of what they're going through to make a decision or to answer a question. It's kind of like ask the question, silence, answer the question, silence. It's very test taker-ish. And here's the thing, analytics is a very collaborative job. You will spend years working with problems and different stakeholders who don't know SQL, and the interview is a part of simulating that collaborative effort. If you're just sitting there silent, that kind of signals to the hiring manager that you're probably going to be an awkward person that's going to have a hard time reaching out to people, sitting in meetings. Even if that's not true, that's what you're signaling, that basically I'm not a yapper, you know what I mean? So you don't want to do that within the interview. So you want to make it more conversational and not just like a test. And specifically when you are dealing with a technical question, always narrate your thinking. So for example, you can say things like, before I write this query, I just want to clarify, are we looking at unique users or total sessions? Does this table have duplicates? What are the foreign keys? Anything that you're kind of thinking as you're writing a query or as you're about to answer a question, narrate that. Even if it is a question for the other person, that's getting clarity, that's clarifying. And being in data analytics, when you're working on a project or working with a stakeholder, clarification is so key, because you can go off and do a bunch of work, realize that's not what the stakeholder wanted. So this is simulating something that will actually be on the job. And you have to signal even throughout, even if you get this question wrong, well, at least they can get there and they can get clarity on the actual problem and what the stakeholder might be needing, right? It signals that you do know what you're doing. The SQL query part might have just been a little rough. So I'm gonna share a story about recently. I was working with a client and very nice, did all the projects within, in the program. And, she used her resources or, whatever to get those things done. However, we went to the mock interview and she literally struggled with every question just because she did not narrate her thinking. She kind of just sat silent, and I could see instantly what her problem was. And it was definitely this interview part. So don't be afraid to narrate your thinking, even if it is a question that you think might be the answer. Just narrate what you're going through. Okay, so SQL query here. First, I'm going to select the columns. These columns here, are these all unique values? Are these rows going to be duplicated? How is this going to work? Like, start to say that. First I was thinking of a subquery. However, if I'm doing this, CTE might make it easier, at least for me. I'm a CTE type of person. So whatever it may be, that's a lot better than just silence. The next thing is not asking clarifying questions or case studies. So like open-ended questions, just kind of answering and not really clarifying what the hiring manager means or whoever the interviewer is of what they are actually asking. So if an interview says something like, our conversion rate dropped 15% last month, how would you investigate this? So what they really want to kind of know is, where is your head at and what are you thinking about? How do you think? And I'll tell you what the wrong answer is. The wrong answer is to list every single possibility that it could be immediately. You want to ask those clarifying questions. So you need to ask stuff like, is this across all platforms or just one? When did the drop actually start? Was it a sudden drop off? Was it a subtle drop off? Has anything changed recently? Has there been a product update to ads? And then stuff like, what does your baseline conversion rate actually look like? These are all clarifying questions because you are trying to investigate and get to the bottom of the problem. Not just listing off, could be this, maybe it's the platform, maybe it's the website, maybe it's the product. You don't want to do that. You want to ask these clarifying questions. This is what you'll be doing in the job itself. Asking these questions is the analytical part that they're testing. They're not testing you for a right answer per se. They're testing to see if you can think analytically. So with you just blurting out answers, it shows that you are jumping to conclusions, which is something you definitely don't want to do in analytics. The next thing is weak behavioral answers. So not actually telling stories when you answer these questions, which is crazy because a lot of these behavioral questions are what get people filtered out immediately. So where I work, we actually do behavioral and then we do kind of technical or an in-between. So it's not a purely technical thing. And you get filtered out so quickly by just being, I would say being awkward, but like just be a person, just talk. You know what I mean? If you do that, you're already hundreds of candidates that I see and I speak with on a weekly basis. So when they ask something like, tell me a time where you had to deal with a difficult stakeholder, and then you say something like, oh, I communicated well and then I ended up figuring it out. That tells me absolutely nothing. But more importantly, use real specifics. Tell a story. Data storytelling is a thing. It's a part of the role. Things like, what was the actual tension? What did they say? What did you say? What data did you use to make your case? And what changed because of how you handled it? And throughout these behavioral answers, since you are applying or interviewing for a data analytics role, your story should always include data and how that made the decision easier or how that resolved the issue. And the last but definitely not least is when a hiring manager or interviewer asks you, do you have any questions? And you ask the same basic questions. When do you look to be making a decision? Or the worst is, nope, I don't have any questions. Or you say something that's very generic like, what does a typical look like in the role? You don't know how many times these hiring managers have heard these same questions. So what I would recommend is, this is your perfect way of standing out. It's normally the end of the interview. They're about to wrap it up. Give them one last thing that's gonna get their mind churning. This is a time for you. They done grilled you for like an hour, however long the interview is. Put them MFs on the grill and start grilling them. You know what I mean? Now, don't take this out of context and, you know, be any type of like rude or standoffish or anything like that. But ask them questions that they probably haven't heard that pertain to the position itself. So I'd answer something like this: what does success look like in this role for 30, 60, and 90 days? What I expect to learn or to be doing at these different milestones. Another thing, which this one is a really good one, is what is the big answer that you guys are trying to find on the team right now? Or even, how does the analytics team communicate what's working and what still has its challenges? So what these questions actually do is they signal that you're already on the team and you're already looking to solve the problems that they have, the biggest problems on the team. So you're already thinking about contributing and you're not just auditioning at this point. All right, so that's gonna be the end of the video. Like the video if you got something out of this. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. And leave me a comment and let me know, what do you think is your biggest downfall when it comes to your resume or even the interview? Love, peace, and chicken grease.